Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. The president is losing the fight over the government shutdown, the longest and potentially most damaging in this nation's history. And the more he tries to make his case, the bigger the hole he digs for himself and for the country. Two different Senate measures to reopen the government failed today, as expected. The surprise was that in the Republican-controlled chamber, where the GOP holds a commanding 6-seat majority, the Democrats' bill got more votes than the president's. The vote was more evidence that the president's position is only getting weaker the longer the shutdown drags on. And as the situation grows increasingly desperate for thousands of families scraping by without the income they've earned, as security concerns mount, especially over the nation's strained aviation system, the Trump administration also knows it is being blamed for the situation, probably in no small part because the president said on camera, basically, you should blame me for the situation. It's clear the White House gets this because the worse things get, the more they try to minimize the shutdown's effects. It's hard to imagine a more tone-deaf message than a bunch of multimillionaires downplaying the hardships that working families have been forced to face. Though, in fairness to those millionaires, they probably have no clue what it's actually like to miss a paycheck. According to the president's chief economic advisor, the shutdown is no more than a glitch, and unpaid workers are simply volunteering.
As soon as this thing goes, the switch will be turned on, the payments will be made, we will go back to normal. This is just a glitch. I mean, I've met with my individual staff members, and God bless them, they're working for free. They're volunteering.
How are they volunteering? How are workers who've been recalled without pay volunteering?
They're coming to workers, they're showing up.
That's not volunteering if you're forced to work without pay and if you don't show up, you lose your job. So that's not volunteering. That's not what volunteering means.
You know what? I'm not even going to go there.
Okay. Now, that's after the president's daughter-in-law and campaign booster Lara Trump paid lip service to the, quote, little bit of pain that some workers are going through.
It's not fair to you, and we all get that, but this is so much bigger than any one person. It is a little bit of pain, but it's going to be for the future of our country. So I would just tell them, please stay strong. We appreciate everything that you're sacrificing. We are behind you, and we're going to do everything we can. I know the president is doing everything he can to resolve this quickly.
But perhaps no one is more out of touch with the real-world impact of the shutdown than the president's Commerce Secretary, Wilbur Ross, a man who's gotten caught lying to Congress and on his financial disclosure forms, both under penalty of perjury. He's a man who's been known to wear $600 velvet slippers, I'm not making this up, you can see the photo, customized with the logo of the Commerce Department. And when even the CNBC reporters who are at Davos while they're interviewing you are cringing, you know you're in bad territory.
It's kind of disappointing that the air traffic controllers are calling in sick in pretty large numbers, depending on the week.
Many of them can't afford to support their families, though.
Well, remember this, they are eventually going to be paid. The banks and the credit unions should be making credit available to them. When you think about it, these are basically government-guaranteed loans, because the government has committed these folks will get their back pay once this whole thing gets settled down. So there really is not a good excuse why there really should be a liquidity crisis. Put it in perspective, you're talking about 800,000 workers, and while I feel sorry for the individuals that have hardship cases, 800,000 workers, if they never got their pay, which is not the case, they will eventually get it. But if they never got it, you're talking about 1/3% on our GDP. So it's not like it's a gigantic number overall.
Mr. Secretary, Mr. Secretary, there are reports that there are some federal workers who are going to homeless shelters to get food.
Well, I know they are, and I don't really quite understand why.
I'm not surprised you don't understand why. I can't imagine a better person to react to all this than Senator Elizabeth Warren, who's been the scourge of the Davos set since she was the special advisor for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in the Obama administration. She is now running to be the next president of the United States. Senator, welcome. I know you have a big announcement about a wealth tax, and I want to dig into that because I think it relates in many ways to what we're seeing. But I wanted to first get your reaction both to Wilbur Ross and then what the president had to say defending Wilbur Ross's remarks. Take a listen.
I haven't heard the statement, but I do understand that perhaps he should have said it differently. Local people know who they are when they go for groceries and everything else. And I think what Wilbur is probably trying to say is that they will work along. I know banks are working along. If you have mortgages, the mortgagees, the folks collecting the interest and all of those things, they work along. And that's what happens in time like this. They know the people. They've been dealing with them for years, and they work along. The grocery store. And I think that's probably what Wilbur Ross meant, but I haven't seen a statement, no.
What do you make of that?
You know, this is the kind of thing that just reminds you, these folks have never lived paycheck to paycheck, and they have no understanding of what the lives are like for people who expect to get a paycheck regularly, go out, work for it, and build their whole budgets around that, build their whole lives around that. And instead, you know, for Donald Trump, for Wilbur Ross, 800,000 federal workers are just pawns in a political game for them. That is fundamentally wrong. It's wrong in human terms, and it's the kind of thing that just makes us realize these are not the guys who should be running our government.
I want to ask you one more follow-up on this. The first book of yours I read, which is called The TwoIncome Trap, which you co-wrote with your daughter, it's a really interesting book, is literally about the situation these workers are facing, right? It's about the fact that people with decent paychecks and good, steady jobs in America still find themselves stretched, still don't have savings.
That's right.
Why is it that there's such a representational gap in this country between those people and their lived reality and what the Commerce Secretary and the President and so much of the sort of Washington class says?
So I'm glad you asked about it, because TwoIncome Trap, you're exactly right. This is a book I wrote in the early 2000s with my daughter. And what we talk about in that is how many tens of millions of families live their lives so close to the financial edge. And contrary to popular wisdom at the time we wrote this book, it's not because they overspend, because they have affluenza, which is what people were writing about at the time. It's because flat wages and rising expenses for housing, for health insurance, to educate your kids, had just put a terrible squeeze on families. And that squeeze has gotten worse. And that fits right into what I'm talking about today with a wealth tax. You're right. These pieces line up. Look at it this way. For years now, for decades now, rich people have gone to Washington and said, just tilt the playing field in our favor just a little bit. And then they come back and say, tilt it just a little bit more. And the next year, tilt it just a little bit more, just a little bit more, just a little bit more, until today in America, the top 0.1% has amassed about as much wealth as 90% of America. Upper middle class, working poor, and the poor. And the consequence of having amassed that much wealth is bad for our economy. Tiny group of people making decisions that always tend to favor a lot of big corporations, and bad for our democracy, because it means, just like you hear, it's now a democracy that is influenced by the wealthy, the well-connected, and is not working for the people.
You have this proposal out today. It's a wealth tax. It's very interesting. Yep. It's not income, right? So incomes are flows. You know, money coming into people a year, and that's usually how we tax things. Wealth is sitting there. It's a stock. It's a thing that's sitting there, and a wealth tax is a novel idea in the American context. It's on the very richest households with $50 million or more in assets. It's about 75,000 households. It would bring in a lot of money, $275 billion a year. So this is a lot. There's also a tax for billionaires. Here's my question to you. The first thing I hear when I look at this and talk to other people is they're going to get out of it. If you pass this and you try to go to Wilbur Ross's assets, or you try to come after Donald Trump's assets, or any of these people, they are going to find a way to get out of it. What do you say to them?
I say, you think I didn't see that one coming? So the way that this is written is to say, first of all, going to tax all your assets wherever located around the globe. So if you were planning to move them to Switzerland or some island, doesn't make any difference. They are all going to be taxed. And the second part of it is we're going to build right into the administration of this tax that it has a very high rate of monitoring, of auditing the rich people on the ultra-millionaire tax. So we're going to be out there counting them and watching them. And the third part of it is, once you identify these assets, it's actually not that complicated and hard, because unlike some other places that tried to build this one isn't going to have a bunch of exceptions. This one says all your assets, wherever located, and we're going to keep counting. And you're going to have to pay, if you have more than $50 million in assets, this is the ultra rich, you're going to have to pay 2% a year of that amount over $50 million. And here's the deal about the money, though. I want to underline this part. It's to use that money to build opportunity for the rest of America. So this is the kind of money, think about this, over the next decade we could produce just short of $3 trillion. That's the kind of money where we could pay for childcare, high-quality childcare for all of our kids. It's the kind of money where we could do real relief on student loan debt. It's the kind of money where we could make a real start on a Green New Deal. It's the kind of money where we could bring down the cost of health care. It's the kind of money where you give somebody else in this economy a chance, a government that's not just working for the tippy top, a government that starts to work for the rest of America.
So there's been this, I think the Overton window, as they call it, the sort of center of this conversation has really shifted. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had floated a 70% top marginal rate. You've come out with this wealth tax idea, which has not, which doesn't have a history in the U.S., unlike the top marginal rate.
No, nope, this is brand new.
It's brand new. Although I will note to people out there who own a home, you're paying a wealth tax right now called property taxes. So it does exist in America. I guess the question is, there is a sense that this is crossing some line, right? You see this in Davos where they're laughing at this idea, and you see it on Trump TV where they say this is the death of the American dream, that there's something un-American about coming after the billionaires and their millions. And what do you say to that?
So let me think about this in terms of just basic fairness. Look, I believe in a progressive income tax, but basic fairness. Compare two people. One has inherited $500 million and has paintings and yachts and airplanes and brings in $50,000 a year in doing some work. The other one, public school teacher, doesn't have anything in savings and makes $50,000 a year. Currently, in America, they get taxed exactly the same. That's a tax system that is really helping the rich and the powerful.
Wait a second, though. I don't want to get too weedsy, but the person who's sitting on $500 million has some passive income coming off those that they're going to pay some taxes on.
Not if they have paintings, not if they have...
Okay,
yes.
But
the only point I'm trying
Wilbur
to
Ross
make...
and they have all their money in slippers and paintings.
Exactly right. Exactly. Yeah, he has it all in slippers. But the real point is, when we're only taxing income, we're taxing two people who may have the same income, but are in wildly different economic circumstances. And here's the deal. Think about the lead up to this. Rich folks, for a long time, have been pushing Washington. They've been lobbying Washington. They've been making campaign contributions. They've been doing bought and paid for experts to get all of the rules just tilted a little more and a little more and a little more in their favor. That's how they've amassed this wealth. And that's how it is that it has gotten so wildly out of proportion. I understand. Not everybody's going to make the same. I get that. But we are now in an America where 1/10 of 1% has about the same wealth as 90% of America. And here's the deal. 40% of America today can't come up with $400 in an emergency.
And that's why folks are in the red line.
That's right. That is not an economy that is sustainable, and it's not a democracy that's sustainable.
I want to ask you, before I let you go, because you're here and you've got a shutdown that's happening right now, which is where we started this conversation. Yep. There's some talk of some movement. The White House seems to be aware now that it is for lack of a better word, getting its butt kicked on this. What do you see happening? What's your sense? You're in the Senate.
Look, the Republicans in the Senate have made clear that they are afraid of Donald Trump. They're not willing to cross him. So the question is, when is Donald Trump going to feel enough pressure that he's going to get this government back and running? Because that has to be the starting point for anything. People are hurting. We need the government functioning. The idea that there are tens of thousands of people who are working and not getting paid, that's not what we do in this country. And thousands and thousands and thousands more who have been locked out of work and can't get paid, that's not what we do in this country. Our federal workers are not pawns in Donald Trump's political game. We need to get this government open.
All right, Elizabeth Warren is the senator from Massachusetts, also running for president this year. Thank you for making some time and stopping by. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, next, as the Trump shutdown.
Hi, everyone. My name's Mike. I'm the creator of Mox News. And for the last 15 years, I have been telling you that as long as I have the support of the community that I serve, Mox News will post videos forever. And that's the truth. As long as I have your support, no one could ever make me stop. Unfortunately, currently, less than 1/2 of 1/10 of 1% of Mox News viewers ever donate, tip, or contribute anything back. Again, let me make that really clear. Much less than 1/2 of 1/10 of 1% ever give anything back. And to those of you who have donated to Mox News, I want to thank you so much, because it's because of your generosity that we have been able to bring attention to important videos that millions and millions of eyes would have never seen. And I think that that's an amazing thing that we've been able to make happen together. And I can't thank you enough for helping me make that happen. So it's not too late. If you'd like to see Mox News covering the 2020 presidential election, if you can't imagine the 2020 presidential election without Mox News, please, there's still time. You can make a difference. It's easy to make a contribution, donation, or tip. You can go to moxnews.com, or in the text body of this video, there are clickable links to the Patreon page or to the PayPal page. And again, it should take less than 2 minutes to make a donation, and your donation can make a big difference. So I thank you all. Stay cool. One of these days this war is going to end, and it would be awesome if Mox News could be there to celebrate that day with you.